Thank you to my newest patrons, Laura Novoletto and West Franklin. I appreciate your support, and as always, you can reach me with any questions or concerns via Patreon PM, Minds.com, or Twitter at A Helping Hand for Me. Every dollar helps, every dollar is appreciated, and every pledge of $10 or more will earn you a permanent spot in my video credits. Alright guys, so if you didn't catch the announcement in my most recent fiction video, I've decided to take a closer look at Kim Possible as a series in response to a large influx of comments from those who believe I was unfair in my assessment. That one episode was ultimately enough to illustrate my point, though it was never my belief that a single episode of a single show canceled a decade ago was solely responsible for the social justice trend we see today, but I do like to be fair. However, a fair review is going to require viewing and analyzing no fewer than 35 episodes, and I will explain my reasoning with that number in the review itself. That said, this might take me a little while to get done, so the Devil's Advocate has agreed to stand in as a guest spot, covering the topic of social justice in sports and sportscasting, which is a job better outsourced anyway, as I've never been much of a sports fan. He has an impressive channel, and if there is one thing I love to see, it's a black man standing up against the rise of this anti-white bullshit. It's why I was annoyed when Tigero decided to abandon the fight in pursuit of comedy, and even more so when his channel closed down. But I'm happy to say that the Devil's Advocate is everything that Tigero should have been and more. If you like what you see here, please head over to his channel and subscribe. I expect him to be a regular collaborator on my channel from now on, and vice versa. Thanks again for all the support, and enjoy.
Let's make a deal.
Hello freaks and geeks. So today I'll be discussing social justice being pushed in professional sports and social justice being pushed on sportscasting and on sports shows and even sports networks such as ESPN. I want to dig deeper into this issue because I've seen multiple content creators talk about it, but because they were talking about an unrelated subject in terms of the amount of social justice activism being pushed in sports, I don't think that they went into great detail about it. I'm not faulting them because in full context, that wasn't the purpose of their videos. What prompted me to make this video was that I watched a video by The Hard Bastard, a content creator who I love very much. And he mentioned it, but I don't think he went into great detail because in context, his video wasn't really about that, at least not specifically. So come with me down the rabbit hole of crazy to explore social justice being pushed in professional sports. Let's do this. You see, when it comes to social justice, the idea that would be infused in sports is not exactly a new concept. Social justice is very political. It doesn't just focus on social issues, but also political issues. And the reason why I say that is because social justice warriors want to put social justice into politics. So to them, it is one and the same. And when it comes to political activism, social justice has certainly seen its heyday. We need not look any further than the civil rights era, and certainly the eras where a lot of people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds were in fact being oppressed by their respective countries. And you could certainly make that argument in America. But when equal rights were obtained, that doesn't mean that social justice activism left sports. Now, for my first example, we will take another look at Colin Kaepernick. You know, the guy who was pushing Black Lives Matter. He wouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem. And he wore socks with the depiction of police officers as pigs. So where did he get that idea from? And how does that link to social justice of the past with social justice today? Let's explore. You see, Colin Kaepernick, he ran into a sociology professor known as Harry Edwards. And Colin Kaepernick didn't meet this Harry Edwards as much as he met this Harry Edwards. You see, Mr. Edwards, he is a hardcore social justice warrior. He has always been this, and I have proof in this. Now, I will leave a link in the description of the video I did about Colin Kaepernick where I went into greater detail about Harry Edwards. But what you need to know is that the reason why I'm using Harry Edwards and Colin Kaepernick as a prime example of social justice being pushed in sports is because this relationship is a pretty good indicator as to the reason why we see so much social justice in sports. Let's look at a quote from the University of Oregon's newspaper that was written in 1968, and it highlights the type of person that we're dealing with when it comes to Harry Edwards. This is a direct quote from Harry Edwards himself. He says, quote, "Oh yeah, the thing I'd like to do is go to some quiet university and become the greatest sociologist there is. But I don't see that happening due to the fact that we live in a racist society. And I don't think white folks are going to change," end quote. Now, in all fairness to Harry Edwards, this was 1968. So you could make a legitimate argument that there was oppression going on and the country was different back then. But let's not focus on that. Let's ask ourselves the question, what if the Harry Edwards that we have today is the same Harry Edwards you're seeing in this quote? Because wouldn't that explain how someone like Colin Kaepernick, who didn't really make a big fuss about anything before, but ran to this guy who is a sociology professor, and we know how sociology supports social justice. Would it be strange if Colin Kaepernick changed because he ran into a radical like Harry Edwards? Because even back then, he was described as an angry man. And even now that we have equal rights under the law, Harry Edwards is still a social justice warrior. And I would argue he is just as radical now as he was then. He's just gotten better at hiding it. But let me tell you who is not so great at hiding it. ESPN as a sports network. Let me show you what I mean by that. If you were to look at ESPN stock prices, they have been falling quite drastically. And I think this Business Insider article pretty much sums it up. It says here, ESPN has a growing number of problems. Falling subscribers, increased costs for sports leagues, its broadcast rights, and sinking investor sentiment are all weighing on the network's financial future. This has put Disney, ESPN's parent company, in a tough spot. According to Steve Cahall, a media analyst at RBC Capital Markets, ESPN is holding Disney back to such a degree that it may be time to move on from the network. Cahall notes that the enterprise value for Disney has sunk to $176 billion from $210 billion in June 2015. Most of this devaluation, according to the analyst, is due to the sinking fortunes of ESPN. Cahall estimates that while Disney's EBITDA has been growing at a 12% annual rate, ESPN's is actually declining by about 3% annually. He says, this all begs the question on whether Disney shareholders are better off without ESPN. That says a lot. But then the question becomes, why is this? Why is ESPN stocks falling so drastically? Why is the company hemorrhaging subscribers and yet people are tuning them out? I have some theories. There are three things about sports fans that seem to be a constant, especially in very profitable markets. And there is one thing that ESPN has been doing lately, especially with their sports commentators, that has been so obvious that I think that you would have to be lying to actually deny it, or you are incredibly misinformed. But before we get into that, allow me to show you some facts about sports fans, especially those who are fans of the NFL. There might be some things about them that may shock you. Let me show you what I mean by that. Check out this chart I found on Business Insider that illustrates viewership of sports based on political ideology and voter turnout. And this is very important because it illustrates the reasons why ESPN is having such a hard time right now. If I could draw your attention to the top right corner, the Republican skew holds high school sports, college basketball, college football, Major League Baseball for the most part, the Olympics, the vast majority of the NFL, and the NHL. Now, why would that be such a big problem for ESPN? Let's find out. Well, according to Sports Business Daily, ESPN will pay $190 million per year for the next 6 years for half of the Big Ten's media rights package. And this article was written in 2016, so that means this will last till 2022. According to Bloomberg, ESPN will be paying $1.9 billion for NFL broadcast rights. This little factoid comes from ESPN's own website, where it is revealed that ESPN and Major League Baseball currently has a $5.6 billion television deal. Now, with just those sports alone, I think you can see a problem here. You're paying a lot of money to sports that are propped up by conservative viewers, and yet ESPN has been pushing this left-leaning progressive social justice nonsense. And let me show you what I mean by that. This is ESPN's First Take. And First Take Netflix ratings have taken a hit, and I think it's been because of the social justice stuff, and especially the leftist stuff. Because as everyone knows, if you are going to discuss sports in America, and if you're going to have a really highly rated show, it's probably going to be a show featuring football. And I've just shown you where football has a viewer base that is more conservative and right-leaning. The person to your far right, his name is Max Kellerman. The person in the middle is Molly Karam, and the person to your left, his name is Stephen A. Smith. We're gonna give Mr. Smith some attention because he is the perfect figurehead as to what is going wrong with ESPN right now. Allow me to give you a quote that came out of this man's mouth. When a guest on First Take dared to question Colin Kaepernick's motivations for his protests, this is what Stephen A. Smith told him. You know, the white guy. He says here, there are certain things you can't simply comprehend when it comes to black plight because you ain't black. So basically, instead of actually addressing the opinion and providing an actual counter argument, he just uses a race card. And mind you, ESPN's First Take is live. But that's not all for Mr. Smith. He also goes on to say, when you have been victimized, the most annoying things in the world to us is when those who have not been victimized, or those who share a cultural identity to those who have victimized us, trying to tell us how we are supposed to react to it. It fuels us even more because we are like, how dare you of all people come to us? So in this quote, he literally said, if you're not victimized, then shut up. So not only does he speak for all black people, apparently, he speaks for all white people, as if white people cannot be victimized. But the last quote is the one that got me the most. He says here, the nerve of anybody, white, telling Colin Kaepernick and black folks how they are supposed to feel or what is disrespectful when you are the one that stirred that level of frustration. He is literally blaming all white people for things that most of them never did. In fact, the vast majority are not racist, don't discriminate. The vast majority doesn't hate anyone. But then his co-host and partner in crime in the form of Max Kellerman also likes to insult Trump supporters. Now, to Stephen A. Smith's credit, he did try to tell Max Kellerman after Max Kellerman tried to label every Trump supporter a racist that doing so wasn't a great idea. But according to Max Kellerman, not only are Trump supporters all racist or support racists, but Trump supporters were susceptible to low quality information. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this was said live. This show regularly discusses college sports, the NHL, NFL, MLB, the Olympics, you know, the sports that conservatives watch the most. And you say something like this on live television? But I love using Stephen A. Smith because Stephen A. Smith is a perfect example of people who are allies to this social justice and leftist ideology getting railroaded because they dared step out of line. Allow me to give you a perfect example of that. I want you to watch this clip from the Young Turks where Cenk Uygur is going to lambast Stephen A. Smith for daring to suggest that black people should vote Republican so that Democrats don't just take our vote for granted. And when I say our vote, yes, I'm actually a black Republican. And I think what Stephen A. Smith said was actually true and a good thing. You should make politicians earn your vote. But listen to how Cenk Uygur treats Stephen A. Smith, because Stephen A. is not a conservative. He mostly agrees with leftist ideology. And one statement subtly makes him a Republican, as if being a Republican is a bad thing.
We've covered Stephen A. Smith on the show many times before, and he appears to be conservative and Republican based on many of the things that he has said in the past.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. A person who actually takes the concept of white privilege seriously, a person who props up Black Lives Matter, a person who tells people to shut up when it comes to someone like Colin Kaepernick because they are white, a person who is extremely passive-aggressive when it comes to Donald Trump, a person who adheres to leftist ideology is now a conservative Republican because he dared step out of line. That is the level of lunacy that we're seeing here. Personally, I wouldn't mind if Stephen A. was a black Republican because I love it when these moral busybodies in the so-called progressive left get triggered because of opinions.
What if all blacks voted Republican? Kind of like he does.
Stephen A. Smith is on record for being a registered independent. He's not right-wing. Nothing he says is right-wing when you look at it in the full context. And aside from that, even if he was, what exactly is wrong with that? And by the way, Stephen A. Smith has been on record saying that he voted for Barack Obama both times, so he doesn't even vote Republican. Oh, but Stephen A. has been in trouble for more things than this. In fact, there was one time where he was in trouble for saying something that I think could reasonably be taken as negative, but the reaction did not fit the crime. If you can even call it a crime. Do you recall the whole Ray Rice scandal? Stephen A. made a comment that got him suspended, and here is the comment. What I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is that let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Because if I come or somebody else come, whether it's law enforcement officials, your brother, or the fellas that you know, if we come after somebody has put their hands on you, it doesn't negate the fact that they already put their hands on you. Well, that comment earned him a week-long suspension from ESPN because there were some people taking him out of context. There were people saying that he was excusing domestic violence, even though he has been on live television saying over and over again he doesn't think a man should ever put their hands on a woman. What he was saying is that if you know a situation is already violent, if you know you are already in a volatile position or situation, don't make it worse by becoming violent. Don't make it worse by provoking. Try your best to diffuse things and not make things worse. In that context, I don't see what is wrong with this statement. And you might be asking, why am I talking about Stephen A. Smith so much? Well, Stephen A. Smith is an SJW, or social justice warrior. And if feminists and social justice warriors have jumped on him, what do you think would happen to a person who is more conservative or a registered Republican? Now, all this leftist ideology and all this dogma that we're seeing out of ESPN and other broadcast networks has been rubbing off on athletes. Let me show you what I mean by that.
This was the first year that players had some say in the starters. How did you approach that process?
I voted for who I thought deserved. That's simple.
Do you think that it worked the way that it was intended, or do you think...
I don't know how everybody voted.
There were some goofy votes.
Yeah. There's always goofy votes. Donald Trump is our president.
Now let me illustrate to you the reasons why that statement really concerned me. You see, the NBA and the NFL and sports leagues like that, they have this concept of protecting the shield. This is why when athletes smoke marijuana in states that have legalized marijuana, sports leagues will still take issue with this, not so much because of the federal ban on marijuana, but mostly to do with perception. This is also why athletes can be fined for just criticizing officials or officiating during games or after games, especially if they're talking to the press, because once again, perception is everything. So LeBron James just said, in a state that Donald Trump won, by the way, because LeBron James plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is Cleveland, Ohio, he just said that Donald Trump got goofy votes. So in the interest of protecting the shield, wouldn't you want to punish LeBron James? I mean, after all, the NBA has fined players $25,000 just for criticizing referees. I think it is more than fair to punish LeBron James for what he said by insulting roughly half the country by calling their votes goofy. Oh, but nothing will happen to Mr. James because he's just insulting those evil Trump supporters. I'm not saying that players should be punished for what they say. Personally, I don't want to see players get punished for criticizing the referees or officiating or even insulting voters. However, if you are going to have rules in place to punish athletes based on what they say in the interest of protecting the shield, then insulting tens of millions of people definitely hurts your shield. As shown earlier, the NBA's viewing audience mostly leans left, and having people like LeBron James around insulting people who lean right doesn't help you build your audience. Instead, you just keep the same leftists that you've always had. But then the question becomes, where does all this come from? This whole leftist, social justice, feminist nonsense. I've got a theory. This stuff, or at least a lot of it, is coming out of college campuses. And we know this because the vast majority of athletes, especially in American sports, are coming out of college campuses, where social justice, feminism, and general leftist ideologies multiply like a virus. And since many of these athletes stay on campus while they are student athletes, and since they go to these classes where they meet these radical professors such as Harry Edwards, for example, it's no wonder where this is coming from. The average college student these days is being indoctrinated and they don't even realize it. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, a sports athlete, a coach, or a commissioner of a sports league to see social justice being pushed in sports and even in sports broadcasting. And we can certainly see leftist ideology being pushed here, and that's fine, because those of us who lean right and are conservative, we have noticed this, and more, we are gonna call it out. But what do I know? I'm just the devil in the details.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.